So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, so we're starting right on time with this first CEOS Cultural Economics online seminar, part of the Association of Cultural Economics. We're starting with this new seminar number 9, Street Performance and Payments in the Online World, presenter by Meg Elkins and Tim Fry from the university in Melbourne. We're starting the new academic year, so actually this is quite exciting. It's maybe some of you already read the paper published, but we also have, well, I'll let the presenters in a minute discuss their plans, their research plans, because this paper is sort of part of a number of things going on. So maybe we just get started in time because we have 2 discussants. We will start with a presentation by the authors and then Professor Karol Borowiecki from the University Business, Southern University, SDU, Southern Denmark University. He will be giving a first response. The authors will be then responding to these first comments. And then we will have Associate Professor Paul Watt. So this is the first time we did this, two discussants. Paul Watt is the head of the Street Musicians International Research Group. So this is quite exciting to have 2 very different perspectives and as commenters to then get us into the discussion of the paper. So perhaps I will just give the word to the authors. Meg?
Okay. Thank you, Chelsea, for the introduction. And I'm really excited to share this research with you all today. This work that we're presenting today actually forms 2 papers. The first one, beyond the realm of cash and busking payments on the online world, is actually already published in the Journal of Cultural Economics. It's coming out in the special issue. So we're very excited to have that paper published. And the second paper that we're looking at is street performers and donations post-COVID, is another paper that's actually under a revise and resubmit in a journal at the moment. So 2 really exciting papers. And not only are journals really excited about this research, but in fact, the world is really excited about this research. It's an understudied, unknown area, and this research reveals the curtain of what's happening in street performers in that online world. When we released a media release about this paper, it was viewed over 4 million times. We featured on the evening news, did multiple radio interviews, but beyond that, it was also featured in many publications around the world. This is work that is really exciting, not just to us as academics, but also exciting to people on the other side of on the other side of our research, which are the artists. So getting the artists involved is really interesting here, but also the people that want to support buskers, and why busking and why street performers is probably where we begin with this. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement, though. None of this work would have taken place without the support of Paul Watt, and who's our discussant this evening, or also the Busking Project, which is where we've got the data from, and that's Nick Broad and Lily Mass. So I'd like to begin saying the reason why we can reveal the data that we have is because Nick and Lily have been willing to share their data with us, and it's a very unique data set that we're able to now evidence what we probably intuitively know, but now we're able to show what is happening in the busking world. Okay, so the question to ask, why busking? Now, often it's an under-researched area. Well, we know it's an under-researched area, and it's a burgeoning area of interest. But the why it's burgeoning is that there's been this understanding that busking actually can be a viable career for these artists. And these artists often are able to move around the world, participate in festivals. They can use it as a mechanism to test their skill as an artist on the street. But not only that, we also see that other commercial ventures are able to come out of busking. Perhaps the most commonly cited busking commercial venture is the Cirque du Soleil in Quebec, and those performances that we see around the world, well, mostly around the world at the moment, came out of the streets of Quebec. And I'm sure that as you're thinking about busking, you would probably be aware of famous buskers that have made it beyond the street in your own district. Ed Sheeran is obviously a very famous one, Tones and I. Also, I'm sure you could put in chat if those that you know that came off the street, Tracy Chapman, Eddie Izzard was on a unicycle at Covent Garden. The beginnings and the burgeoning of these artistries often came in this beautiful performance space that was the street. But not only that, and what we've seen in post-COVID is that these street performers can increase the vitality of spaces around them. They draw in this exceptional vitality beyond just nuisance factor, and they're able to generate interest in the street and create energy and vibrancy, often where there is none. And there's been numerous cases that are cited where buskers actually create energy in these environments. And there's a reason partly why we should be interested, and that is that for some performers, there's a shrinking market. There's less venues they're able to perform at. Also that these streaming services are now taking away ability to earn income because there's such small amounts of creative income they're able to generate from services like Spotify and YouTube, and in some instances Instagram. So busking for this reason is a really interesting area to look at. And what we often find is that it is completely underfunded, and it's completely entrepreneurial for this reason. And with artists in COVID, beyond just this idea of the gig economy, it's particularly important now. For some people, the idea is that talent can be relatively cheap, and those precarities of the artist that we find and the challenges that the artists have at the moment mean that they have to devise new ways to create income. And there is no one particular career trajectory that an artist has. These are not formulated. An artist's career is often patchwork, not well formulated. There's no guarantees in art. And what's fascinating about street performers is they get immediate feedback on whether their show is working. They engage with the audience. They have to develop their skills directly. They have to seek out fans. They have to draw fans into them. And this is the exciting area of busking, is that it's an immediate testing ground for any work that they bring along. There's some fantastic work by Harrison Pepper that watched Washington Square in New York and did an ethnographic study for 2 years, watching how street performers engage and develop their craft and draw in an audience. Even though it's 1990, it's still relevant today. This craft of busking is the ability to engage a performance and create income just from your raw talent on the street. Really exciting area. And we know that this gig economy that we're in right now means that artists increasingly are having to push their entrepreneurial spirit in ways that they probably haven't seen before. Their work is often short term or contract, and this gig economy also lends itself to the idea of busking. This feature that we have of the creative and artistic labour means that firms within those industries are often transferring the risk away from themselves to to the workers at the coalface. And this is so evident in times of COVID, when there's support mechanisms for artists, but there's a lot of artists that are falling through the gap. So potentially busking has created, believe it or not, an alternate career source and an alternate way for artists to earn an income. So there's this perfect storm that happened with COVID and busking. COVID meant that street performers were no longer able to perform on the street. And so this exchange that we see taking place between the artist and the audience for coin has shifted. And beyond that, people are nervous about using cash. That, the idea of potentially transferring money. There's a feeling of transference of disease as well. Not necessarily that it's been proven, but as we are primed in the current environment, we are more likely to tap and go than we are to use our cash and pull out our wallets. I know for me personally, I haven't taken out cash in probably over a month, and tap and go is now my preference. So we're primed actually to move away from cash. The problem is street performers' main source of income has been cash. And this idea of cash means that often we haven't been able to trace who tips, how they tip, what type of artists get tipped. But this acceleration in the COVID world has given us this perfect storm. Unfortunately, not always for good, but in some instances, it's been very good for some buskers, maybe not all. And but it also has interesting ramifications for ways that local governments can invigorate spaces, bring people back into cities when the habit has been to get out of performance. As a behavioural economist as well, what we're finding is there's a level of timidity about people going back into a public environment to watch performances. And the anecdotal evidence from buskers here when they were able to perform was the sense of joy that people got just from being able to witness performance that has been taken away from us in these pandemic times where we're not able to participate culturally. And we know that cultural participation is highly linked to well-being and happiness. So the intriguing part about this research is that move away from the physical hat to the digital hat. And the digital hat is where we start to pay for donations either online or through a mobile payment. The pure art of busking, that integral part, is that money exchange between the performer and the artist. And what this organisation that we're doing this work with, Busco, has enabled us to do is to watch how those performers are being paid, who's being paid, how are they being paid. And this hotline, believe it or not, is often incorporated in a performance where they ask their audience for donations. Now, intriguingly, this is where nudge can come in. I know there's a performer in Canada, for example, that uses the number 20 a lot in his performances. So he'll say, oh, it looks like we've got 20 people here right now. I can see there's potentially 20, something within my performance, or and he primes the audience to have in his mind the idea of 20. And then right at the end of his performance, he talks about offering $20. And in fact, we know from our data that he gets tipped $20 more than any other performer in the world. So these nudges and this hatline is a real art here to elicit money out of those potential patrons. Some part is guilt, some part is entertainment. There's another really nice story about a busker that says, you know, for $10, you know, I'll sign your T-shirt. For $20, you can take me out for dinner. For $100, you can take me home. Not that we want to encourage that, but you know, there's an art to that hat line, and the digital engagement has then created a possibility that these performers can generate more money, because you know, often you're limited by just what you have in your wallet to be able to exchange. What happens if you really enjoyed a performance and you go, well, actually, I don't have any cash, but I want to give to this performer? And what we've seen is that there's a generosity associated with this digital hat line. And with Busco, they introduced the digital hat in 2015, but as you'll see from our data, there was a very, very slow takeoff of these digital tips. But I don't want to give away our secret later on of how much there was, but we can see that there's been a spike in COVID. The Busco site itself is a cultural and creative industries platform. It's a platform that engages both patrons and or fans and performers. At present, there's 8,000 buskers on the site, which is quite enormous. We didn't look at all of those because they're not all active. But the opportunity is there not only for donations, but also to hire these performers, to engage with fans, to build a community. Part of their role is advocacy, and part of their role is research, because they want to be able to share with their artists the best known research to help out these artists. So this is a little bit what the site looks like, and what the buskers look like, and who they are. You'll see within that there's dancers, there's musicians, there's circus artists, there's even street artists, and a range of artists. These are not just musicians, these are a wide range of street performers that we have here. And their social mission, in fact, is to try to legitimize street performance as a way to generate an income and earn a living, a legitimate way to earn a living, and also an accessible way to earn a living as an artist that's not often available in other means of artistry, that it's accessible. And dare I say that street performers earn more than you think they do. But I say that really quietly, because the tax man really shouldn't know exactly how much they earn, and we don't want to share too much of that information. We can only share the digital payments, but often the reason why it's hard to get this information on artists is that it is in fact a secret world of how much they get paid. I don't think any paper truly understands how much they get paid. So dare I say, it is a viable form of profession if you are good at it. And generating that hat line is a critical element to how you get donations. Okay, so let me tell you about the data itself. Again, the data comes from the Busking Project. And you can see the site there. Please sign up as a fan, have a look at who's there. There's a wonderful feature of an international map, so you can see where street performers are in your city, who they are, where they're performing, and an ability to engage with these performers up front. Our specific data set is for 3,750 performers. So we even though there's 8,000 on the site, we only look at the ones that are very active in this space. And the period that we're looking at for the first paper is November 2015 to August 2020. Obviously, there's more data available now, but this is when the papers were under review and being published. This is the information that we have. It's not, we don't have gender because the performers themselves are anonymous. We don't have very much information on their demographics in terms of characteristics, whether they've got a degree or how educated they are. But what we do know is their presence on the platform. So these are things like how much social media presence they have, what date they signed up, what type of artist they identify as, the amount that they wrote on themselves, characteristics around their presence on the platform, whether they're available for gigs, whether they've got albums available. What we do also have is, interestingly, the actual donations. So the period that we're looking at, they had 2,555 donations, and they began at 65 cents and they went to 550. Now, all of the data that we're looking at is in US dollars, 2019. So we've obviously these artists are in fact all over the world, predominantly in Europe and USA and Canada. There are also, I think, 263 artists that we had in Australia, 75 in my home town of Melbourne. So the artists are all over the world. Unfortunately, we only have where they signed up to. We're not able to follow where they are all around the world. We can only look at where exactly they signed up to. And the payments that we see here are either by a credit card or PayPal, and half of them did not leave an email. So they're ostensibly anonymous. That's the data. And from this data, we're asking two research questions in the first paper. The first one is, what factors influence the likelihood of an artist receiving a donation through the platform? The second one is, if a donation is received, what factors influence the amount of that donation? So this is the first paper from the Journal of Cultural Economics. Again, we're limited by the data that we're being able to give in terms of our research questions. This particular busker is actually on the street of Melbourne. Paul, if you recognise it, that's a City of Melbourne bin behind us there. Again, this is a statue. The reason why I'm showing you the statue here is it's the breakdown of artists that are quite interesting here. You'll notice that most of the artists are in fact musicians. 2,450 of these artists are musicians, and they're a standalone category. We grouped together, there was either 14 main genres. We grouped together circus performers that we identified as circus performers, clowns, jugglers, magicians, freak shows. Believe it or not, yes, there are freak shows. I'm sure you've seen those freak show artists that, put swords down their throats and do weird things to their bodies. I think there's at least 60 of those artists on the platform. Then we also have another category that we classify as theatre. So these are dancers, musicians, storytellers, puppeteers, and statues. So we've grouped these two groups together. The other performers are the ones that didn't identify in a main category. But you can see here that the majority of those artists on the platform are musicians, but we have a reasonable collection of circus performers, theatre performers, and other genres. And you can also see where the donations are made for each of those categories, that most of those donations are towards the musicians and the circus performers and the theatre performers. We can see the average donation is about $16 for the musician, $14 for the circus performers. And I'm not, oh no, that's the total donation value, not the average. The average is down here. Sorry, $11.50 for musicians, $18 for circus, $14 for theatre. So there's a lot of zeros in our data set. Quite a number of street performers didn't get anything, but these are the street performers that did receive a donation. To test these two research questions, we used a Heckman selectivity model. And so we wanted to test one, the maximum likelihood if a performer received a donation, and a second test for the amount that they receive, or the probability of the amount that they receive. So the first question around the first one of the decision to donate, and the second one is the amount to donate. So what we found here is that the probability of the donation depends on several factors. It's what type of genre they are, the type of performer, where their location was, where they signed up, in terms of where they are in the world, what information was contained on their profile, because we have the access to that information, and where they signed up on the platform. Was it pre or post COVID? This is important also for the second paper. Some of these variables actually did influence the donation amount, particularly the amount of information they had. And we also include information on whether donation is or not anonymous. Of course, if you tip, you're able to leave an email and connect back to the community and keep engaging with the performer. This is a really exciting opportunity to for the performer to re-engage. Once they digitally tap on, they get an option to continue to receive information, and some people enjoy being part of a community. We actually, in our model, I don't know if I can reveal this, but our reviewers suggested there's some non-linear relationships with some of the aspects that we're looking at, particularly on the amount of characters. There's a threshold point where too many characters start to deprive, but we did find the more an artist wrote about themselves, in fact, the higher the donation amount that the artist received. And this is what we found. Genre matters. So it matters, but in a different way for different performers. The amount that they wrote online is important. And what is more important, and I love this, is the fans. It's the number of likes or fans you have on a page elicit more donations. So it's, in a way, popularity elicits more donations. There's a fantastic saying from Kelly in 2008 that said, an artist needs 1,000 true fans. And if that artist has 1,000 true fans and each offers $100, then you have a viable career. And often they're able to generate this through those social media elements. But interestingly, in our study, social media was not significant in terms of eliciting donations. Now, in the paper, we talk about the fact that what happens is often that social media is important in some previous research if you're an established artist, but it's not as important as if you're an emerging artist. That's a paper from Cultural Economics by Meisenberg looking at the German folk scene. For genre, there was a genre effect, but not for one location. Fans and biography length did mean that people received more, but other aspects such as having more images or more videos on your profile didn't actually impact. The donations amounts for these ones did impact. If they had a credit card and used an email, they were more likely to leave a higher tip than they would without an email, talking then about the community. And another big factor that we found was that the performer that joined the platform after the COVID announcement that we're taking as March 11, when WHO announced the pandemic, that increases the probability of donation, but not necessarily the amount they receive. Now, this is the bit that I really think is interesting out of this research. I told you about the hat line at the beginning of the presentation, you know, the $20 amount, and I'll take, if you, for $100, I'll take you home. The performers that are able to elicit higher donations are in fact the circus performers. And we had to think about what is going on here that the circus performers would indeed generate higher tips. First thing is, we know that the musicians actually get more donations, but it's the circus performers that get the higher tip levels. And we went back into the literature to see why this was going on. And pretty much it comes down to that circus performers integrate into their performance the hat line. They talk about the donations, whereas it's very hard if you're a musician, you know, strumming away, to break performance and say, by the way, you can donate to me. And you can't necessarily, you know, if someone's walking away from your performance, you can't bring them back in and say, hey, you left without leaving a tip. Whereas that becomes part of the clowning aspect of a busker. So perhaps part of this research, Paul, we can do is find better ways for musicians to create that hat line and generate the eliciting of donations from those street performers. So musicians, in fact, were more likely to receive donations, but received a smaller amount. Probably unsurprisingly, those performers with more fans also and longer longer profiles were also able to elicit more money. And the payment method, whether they were anonymous or not, was also important. Artists in the UK and USA and Canada had higher probabilities of donations, more so than other aspects. Okay, so that's the first paper. The second paper came out of what we found in the data. When we actually started to investigate the data, we went, well, how much? We know that they're getting more from post-COVID, but the real question is how much. So this one, we said, with the ability of buskers to perform in an outside audience, restricted or removed, do we see an increase in the number of new sign-ups of performers on the platform? Keeping in mind, this is March 11 that we're looking at specifically. Did we see more sign-ups on the platform? And the second question was about the donation activity by donors through the platform. Has that actually increased? So one, have we got more sign-ups? And two, have we increased the amount of donor activity? So this paper is currently under review. No, it's not under review. It's revise and resubmit. So comments would really be helpful here. With this particular paper, what we looked at was a regression discontinuity. And the regression discontinuity comes from that very important moment in, I think it will be in history, on March 11, when we went beyond to this is just a little virus that's happening in China to a worldwide pandemic declared by WHO. And COVID was indeed declared a pandemic on March 11. You probably all know where you were when that happened, because the world changed in that moment. We use two methods here. One is regression discontinuity for that particular moment, and the other is an ANOVA technique, looking at the analysis of variance to show the impact of that WHO. Our discontinuity regression looks at the daily data, and it looks, one, to the question of whether the platform activity increased in terms of donations, either in number and amount, and post-COVID, and then the ANOVA is then breaking it down into treatment groups. So there's three distinct treatment groups that we're looking at with the performers. One is the group that received a donation before the announcement. Two is those that only received a donation after the announcement. And the last one is that the performers that received donations both before the announcement and after the announcement. Now, we're at the moment debating about whether the ANOVA is the best method, but I wanted to show you this. This is basically a number of sign-ups and donations. The new sign-ups are in blue. And you can see this it begins in 2015 when Busco opened its platform, and you can see it's steadily rising over the time. And this is the point here of that you can see that incredible rise. Up here that it's almost this exponential lift in the amount of new sign-ups. So while performers weren't able to generate cash on the street, you can see that there's a distinct lift in the numbers. So, here we're looking at 3,500, and within the space of 170 days. So this is the COVID announcement to our last data point. You can see that lift from basically 3,500 up to 5,500. And then the same then again for when we're looking at the donations. There's almost a vertical rise that from people transferring away from almost those cash into this big lift. Initially, there's not that much in terms of, this is the number of donations, not the amount, can I say. So what we can see here is the number of donations is just lifted from, just 500 to over 2,550 in 170 days. And this previous time period, it's a really slow acclimatization to get people to transfer into giving mobile payments. And it's really stark evidence to the impact COVID has had on those online donations. And then this next graph here, you'll see again, this is the dollar amount of donations. It began very, very slowly lifting, barely even $5,000 up until the point, or I think it's about $8,000 right before the pandemic announces. And then in 170 days, that number lifts to 40,000. Now, I know anecdotally, even since then, talking to Nick at Busco, the amount that they've seen increases over 30 times. This has been a transformation for buskers on the street. It's really increased their ability to generate income and continue their livelihoods, even though they're not often able to perform on the street. These are some results that we have in terms of those research questions, and all positive and significant. I think what we have is only sign-ups is at that 10% level, but all the others are at 99% significance in terms of the number of donations post-pandemic announcement has significantly increased. The total value of donations has significantly increased. The average value of those donations has also significantly increased, and they're all of these are presented with robust standard errors. So when we come to our research questions of the impact of pandemics, of this pandemic on these street performers' income, we can see that there indeed has been a big impact post-COVID. We see, and for these, they're all in US dollars, 2019. So perhaps there's some smoothing out of previous donations, but it's so exciting to see how this platform is generating income for these performers. There's looking also at the ANOVA to just again reinforce what we find here. You can see, remember, there are 3 treatment groups that we have. Pre-WHO announcement, you can see here in terms of donation value, these are at 95% confidence intervals, by the way, is quite small. Post-CO, it's quite significant. It's almost you know, $6 more in terms of value, and we can see there for both. In terms of donation value, very small pre-COVID, post-COVID, it's rising. And then when we look at the number of donations, we also see, oh, sorry about that, the same story, and as with also the average donations increasing, but not so much as the other three. Okay. So what did we find when we were looking at post-COVID world? Well, the post-COVID world is a very different one to the pre-COVID world, obviously, not only in terms of donations, but also in the way local councils are dealing with it. Some local governments are locking down performance spaces, and others are encouraging performers to get out there and invigorate spaces. What we found here is the inability for performers to be on the street may actually show that there's an increase in mobile payments, or even those that are on the street, maybe there's this move towards a cashless transaction, people not wanting to handle cash or have cash on their person. But it also is allowing these street performers to build connection with their communities and their fans online, particularly where they're not able to create a street presence. By joining the platform, they also give their fans an opportunity to donate even without performing. So it might be that there's just a desire for patrons to support these artists because they are aware of how difficult the circumstances are for artists. So we've seen perhaps a generosity of artists just receiving donations because of a sympathy effect or an empathy impact here. So the size may be just that the platform is gaining notoriety or contagion effects among the artists themselves. And there's maybe a move towards that digital hat. Now, interestingly, the way we think about spaces at this point is really important too, because as those street performers return to the street, their world has changed. And Busco is developing those connections and ability again for artists, not only to advocate for themselves, but also to build a presence. Now, there is some there's some conjecture, at least within research, that platforms actually create what we call a thin relationship as opposed to a thick relationship with their fans. Often if you're able to see a fan face to face, you're able to have a very personal relationship. There's a paper by Dalia Chesa and Decker just from this year that talks about these thin relationships that platforms create. So the next stage for these platforms is to really engage with that community so they feel the presence. We've seen that these patrons are now willing to throw into the digital hat, not just to the physical hat. And this is exciting for us because we get the data and we can analyze it a bit more in data that we've never seen before. Platforms such as Busco do still allow those audience and performers to interact. There's a couple of interesting things to talk about in this post-COVID world, and that is some cities have actually locked down performance spaces. I don't know if there's anyone in London right now, but there's been an enormous problem in Westminster, at least an advocacy group, where areas, maybe the most famous busking space in the world, such as Covent Garden, where many of the world famous musicians began, have introduced restrictions on the amount of pitches. There's only 25 pitches now that they can have format, and the sets can only be 45 minutes long, but also they've taken away the ability for dangerous items, so there's no more sword throwing or dangerous items being able to be used. now that's in contrast to something like my home city with Melbourne, where they were actually encouraging street performers to get out there and having Instagram prizes for the best street performers in order to activate the city. We got because workers weren't going into the city, the city, in fact, was a dead space, and they used activation through performers to activate and bring back energy and life to the city. And obviously, now that they've got the new QR codes, we're primed to use mobile payments. So these are not only easy, but they're also timely mechanisms that enhance donor behaviour. So our next project, believe it or not, is around these QR codes. And we're working on some experiments with 40 boards from artists around the world, looking at nudge behaviour and average donations. This is a really exciting area of research. It lends to me as a behaviouralist, but also to find out what actually works in terms of encouraging higher levels of donations for these very important artists that are often on the fringes and unsupported. They're not nuisance, they're actually a viable contribution to our city, and it's great that we can support them in their pursuit for their career. So this is our next area of research that we're going into, and I think I might leave it there.
Wonderful, Meg. Super, thank you. And I see that, well, we have the presence of Nika abroad. He's commenting some things on the chat, so thank you, as well as an updated graph on the amount of dollar donations on the platform as of August 2021. So that's very valuable. Thank you,
Nick,
Meg,
I can't see that. I'm keen to.
Yeah, we can always chat. But so we are about 10 minutes for 12. I would like to give the word now to Karol Borowiecki to give some response.
Yes, thank you very much, Truth, and especially to you, Meg, and also Tim, for having provided and presented us such an interesting piece of research. I will focus perhaps only on the COVID paper. It is, I think, known that I had the opportunity to well, comment a bit more deeply the other paper, the one that is published or forthcoming in the JCE.
Very grateful for that.
I will just focus here on the COVID paper. And first of all, I think the research area is really fantastic. It's very kind of wide in some sense and fits very well into cultural economics. I mean, it is low culture, but you cover all these different domains, from music, through dance, to theater, and so on. The street performances, they matter also for tourism, for the attractiveness of city, and hence it is, I think, something that fits so nicely into the research agendas of many of us. While I share this enthusiasm for the platform and for well, for street performances and also the basking platform, I think that we should also hear a little bit echo the voices that appeared here in the chat. I think Nick commented, but it's also something related to the fact that, well, as with any platform, I guess there will be winners and losers, right? So this sort of platforms, I guess, will increase competition between the street performers. And well, we know with higher competition, usually the prices and profits go down. So I guess some will benefit, others may be harmed by this platform. It's more a kind of general observation here. Then I have one main comment, and I think this is a kind of only kind of important comment here that I think would be good to perhaps consider. And then I will have about 3 or 4 suggestions on how to improve or how to write another paper in this area. So kind of more open. The main comment is the following: you do not take account of the trends in your analysis. So you consider these 1,500 days before COVID, a very long period, and then a much shorter period after COVID. But as we have seen now, and this is something that I think needs to be included in the paper as well, this very nice, very impressive time series graph that really shows you that actually there was a very clear trend throughout the whole time period. And then the trend kind of changes and things get steeper, while the growth gets steeper. So a few suggestions on how to improve this here. Well, first of all, this time series, I think, graph needs to find space in the paper. I think it would be fascinating if we would learn a little bit more about the COVID context in Australia, in relation especially to this kind of post-COVID time. We see there these kind of jumps and so on. Perhaps you could relate it to the introduction of lockdowns, paid out subsidies by the government, if this has happened in Australia, changes in the unemployment and so on. In the regressions, you could control, and I think you should control for the trend as well. Or alternatively, you may look at growth rates as opposed to the kind of totals or averages. And so now you look at the total number of donations. You could look at the growth rate, right? Because really what is changing is there is a big change in the growth rate. And I think I would also narrow down the pre-COVID window to something a bit more comparable, because now with these 1,500 days, I mean, it's a whole data that you have, that you use in a kind of objective way, which is great, but it also includes the very early years of the platform, when the platform was, probably a very different platform to what it is nowadays. Then if you allow 3 shorter suggestions on perhaps, how to add more value to this very nice paper. First one, can we learn something more about the mechanisms with regards to donations? So why do people donate after the onset of the COVID pandemic? Is it that people are bored because of lockdowns and they kind of find alternative things to do? Is it because people are maybe wealthier due to governmental subsidies and so on, and they can afford it, or some other psychological factors and so on? I think that this could be nice to be discussed and maybe even approached with data. And then the next suggestion, you focus on donations. And kind of, observe that donations change after COVID. But what also may have changed, and I think it's very likely, the behavior of the street performers, right? They maybe are now more active on social media, posting more. Maybe they perform more privately. Maybe they have a bigger online visibility and so on. And I think it would be very nice if we knew a bit more these things in order to be able to extract really the COVID effects that you are interested here in. And then finally, as you have also mentioned here in the first paper, the data is really great that you have, because it covers so many different domains: musicians, dancers, theater, visual artists, and then down to circus and statues. And well, the skills required among all these domains probably differ, right? I mean, I wouldn't be able to be a musician. I probably could be a statue if I was patient enough. So is there some kind of difference in the sign up of the artists based on their background, right? So are maybe more, I don't know, lower skilled, if I can use this phrase. I'm not sure everybody will agree, or well, those street musicians those street performers that need perhaps a less of an education of a skill in order to perform, are these signing up more perhaps than others? Can we say something more on this? And then there is, of course, also this kind of private hire button and option on the basking platform. I think this could be another well, project and looking at your fast progress in this area, I think it will be maybe something also that you have already considered. So in summary, I think it's an excellent research area. Two very nice papers, one already published or forthcoming in a top field journal, the other addressing a very current and important aspect at a kind of pivotal moment, really. So I'm very much well looking forward to seeing where this will lead us next. And thanks so much for this interesting research. And Tim, yes, I will write it up and email you as well.
Karol, they're fantastic suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karol, for these comments. This, hire me is like it will be like the trend as well for groceries, take home groceries like that. Megan, could you close your slides, please? And then maybe you guys can do some, thank you.
Okay, well, I think I got the job of responding to comments, and I think actually I got the wrong job. I should probably have presented. Thank you, Karol. That's an amazing set of comments. Obviously, we're very focused and pragmatic. The second paper is on a revise and resubmit, and there are a series of reviewer comments. Interestingly, many of them very similar to yours, so it's quite useful to have that. One of the things I picked up at the start was that and it's clear in the slides that Meg gave us that there's a distinct kink in those plots. Those are weekly plots. In the regression discontinuity, we go down to daily. But there's almost like a structural break. And you remarked on that. And so one thing I'm thinking about is almost like redoing and effectively extrapolating out the trends prior to the COVID announcement, and almost like looking at a counterfactual and saying, had COVID not happened, what would have happened? Because there was clearly a growth in donation activity. There was clearly a growth in sign-ups by buskers to the platform. So if COVID hadn't have happened, where would we have been relative to where at the end of our data we ended up? And I think that's quite a nice little counterfactual that would really say something different happened. And that would strengthen what we're doing. I also like the idea that because we have a very extended period before COVID where, as Nick Broad could probably tell us, we're looking at the platform launching and growing, perhaps we should curtail the amount before COVID. Because at the moment, COVID is 170 days as opposed to 1,500 and something before. So we actually condensed the before and said, let's look at that growth just before and then the counterfactual of just after. I think that would actually help us tell our story. But I think the story still comes through that something structural happened at the time that the WHO announced that COVID was a global pandemic. And we saw an influx of performers to this particular project, the busking project. We saw an increase in financial transactions flowing through that platform to them. And so I think that I'm really appreciative of those comments because I think it strengthens our arguments. And that this is such a really rich data set. And there are so many different things that we could do. And it's interesting that reviewers from the second journal asked for lots of things that are in the Journal of Cultural Economics paper, which we can now cite, but it reveals in the double blind who we actually are. So it's an interesting thing. But thank you, Karol, and thanks for all the effort you put in, both earlier on the first paper and now again on the second.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Tim, for the responses.
Meg, do you have something to respond? Should we move to Paul? Perhaps?
Let's move to Paul,
Yeah?
and then I'll Yeah.
Paul, welcome. I think you have also some other news to share with the audience, but it will be lovely to hear your response, your comments. Sorry.
I'm really thrilled to be asked to be a discussant. Meg and I have known each other for a while, and I think part of this project was drummed up over a beer in a pub that was not a bunch of group of friends that we happened to find each other, and it's wonderful and it's great to be working with Meg and Tim and also Nick. And actually Meg and I have a pitch into the International Journal of Community Music for a special issue along the lines of culture, commodity, and something else, community. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I just want to reflect that this is a brand new area of research, and I'm the research director of the Street Music Research Group, and we all met probably 2 months ago now. And there are about 30 of us in this group across all continents, working across about 8 languages, not just English. And everyone's jaw dropped when Meg presented, because this is exactly the kind of data contextualization that we as scholars just don't have. And there's I wanted to make 3 comments. One to do with that crass subject called money. The second, I'm going to reflect a little bit more on Meg's idea of the vitality of the street space, which will then lead me to talk just very briefly about behaviours and the nudge, because I'm so super keen to know what's coming. But I just want to start with the issue of this data that is like gold dust, because I don't know the backgrounds of everyone in this room, but anyone who's done ethnography with street performers know that you will kill your research project if you mention money. It's dead in the water before you even start. And Meg is quite right to describe this as a secret world, because so much is at stake. If a busker lets slip that they make $10,000 a month on that particular corner, everybody else will want to be on that particular corner. I've done a little bit of ethnography, and I find that depending on where you are, certainly in Vienna, I had the experience of street musicians being very reluctant to even engage with the conversation, even just a hello, because they are policed and they are regulated. And a harpist that I spoke to thought I was from the Vienna City Council checking up on her permit. And it wasn't until she knew from my extremely bad German that I wasn't a local, I could then have a conversation with her. So this data that we have is important, because those who have elected to be on the platform to work with Nick and Lily and Meg know that their statistics and their data will be shared. And it's just a wonderful thing that they volunteered to be on this, because we have mined their data, and there's lots of stuff we can do about it. I also want to make the point that there are taxation implications for what buskers earn, particularly on the festival circuit. It's not an all expenses paid junket. Street musicians to festivals are required to pay part of their own way, not all of it. And most countries have very strict rules, as we know, and sometimes the amount is not very high of money that can be taken out of the country. So not even festival organisers will disclose which companies sponsor, although I did get out of a festival organiser in New Zealand that the best buskers at the Christchurch Festival can walk away after about 10 days to 2 weeks work with many tens of thousands of dollars. But that can't be taken out of the country unless they can somehow open a bank account, which they're not supposed to do. So I'm just commenting on that the financials of what we study is very complicated, very interconnected, and it differs between randoms on street corners and the festival circuit, which we don't have time to talk about. But Meg is absolutely right, that word a secret world is a heavily guarded world. And I think that's really important for anyone going into who wants to join us in this, these issues are paramount and important. The second topic I wanted to talk about was, I loved Meg's expression about the vitality of the street space, because a good performance can make or break that. And it is even from the moment of setting up their equipment, or the rope that fences off their bit, or the way they unpack their props, from the moment that starts, the space changes. And that it needs to be done elegantly and efficiently, and that sets the tone right from the start. And these nudges can often begin in that space where they shoo people out of the way, or they get all kids to come to the front because they're going to guilt those kids into grabbing more money from their parents. And this leads me to the third point, is that I hadn't been on Busco for quite some time, and I looked up earlier today, and I don't know what the question is that I'm asking, but I found going onto the platform, and this is something I didn't even think about till I was there, that in a way, Nick and Lily, in designing the website, I suppose, I don't know if they consciously felt it, but they have to somehow capture that vitality from real-time space in the street to a platform. And I was astonished at how engaging it was. And I felt a part of a community, even though it was on my laptop, on my screen, and even scrolling down to see stuff was not a problem. So I think it's impressive that community can be replicated on a flat computer screen. And I'm really interested in the research that you're doing next, Meg, because Wheel Street musicians, when they're back on the street, how are they going to have a QR code? Is it going to be on a stick or a sticker, or how are they going to manage it? And or have I got the wrong end of the stick? Something else I'm really interested to know from a behaviouralist point of view, that I just thought I'd give someone a donation in the end, and it popped up to be £5 UK, and without thinking, I thought, well, that's a bit much. And then I went to think, I wonder how much that is in Australian dollars. And actually, when I clicked on the Australian dollar thing, it only suggested $5. So I'm intrigued, perhaps this question more for Nick perhaps than Meg, that the psychology of that I thought was really smart, unless it's a mistake, or unless I made a mistake. And I also found that the merchandising, the CDs, were as little as $5 Canadian. And I just thought, oh yeah, I'll get that. And I'm just wondering, if you do buy a CD online, or an album, as it called, is it a CD in the mail, or do you get a link to a podcast, or is it a link to Spotify? And I'm just wondering if these questions are forming part of your next project, and how will the flat screen on the computer experience of tipping or buying merchandise, or even navigating, how might some of those behaviours work on the street with a printout of a QR thing flapping in the breeze like it is outside a supermarket? So they're really only the comments and questions and sort of random ponderings that I've had. But I want to congratulate you both on this research, because it's new, it's innovative, and it's important, and it's setting a high benchmark for the rest of us. So congratulations.
That's really kind, Paul. Thank you for that. And I'm intrigued by those comments around the donations, and the Nick with £5 and £5 Australian dollars. I'm thinking that's definitely a nudge, and I can't wait to share with you some of the nudges that have been trialled. But that's still secret, because it's not yet out there. Nick, did you want to have a comment? Can I introduce Trills? This wouldn't happen without Nick.
Absolutely.
He allowed us the data and allowed us to come into this very sacred world of the buskers, and he could probably tell you a little bit about. Our data stopped in August 2020, but
yeah, I see Nick is probably preparing to get a conversation, so that'll be lovely.
Yes. Yeah.
Like to,
I think it'd be great to hear from Nick.
Yeah.
We couldn't have done any of this without Busking Project and Nick and his collaborators through the platform, and it's great from an academic perspective to hear that this work is interesting and potentially innovative. But what we really love is the partnership that we have with Nick and the Busking Project. So perhaps Nick might like to respond, particularly to Paul's comments, and tell us a little bit more about the Busking Project, and perhaps where you're going next with it all.
Well, Meg has sworn me to secrecy on some of the answers to those questions because her paper is not out yet. But we are trialing a lot of A/B tests on the pages that people get to when they, you know, after they first scanned. Sorry, one second, my dog's trying to get up on the couch in this co-working space. You're not allowed to do that. So when they first scan the QR code, they'll come to the website, and at the moment they see a tipping page, and we're going to be making some minor and some major changes to that to see how we can affect average tip amount and conversion rates. So that's, you know, using economic theories I'm not too familiar with, that Meg is helping us with.
But also the amount of donations that have happened 2021.
Right, so we are now at, I think, 110 times the rate that we were pre-COVID. So last month we processed as many tips as I think we did in the first 5 years of our company combined or something. I mean, it's been just astonishing. And this is despite, you can see the sort of the spikes going up in almost every country, and then Australia has just plummeted because of your lockdown. So you can really see the impact of lockdowns on how much street performers are earning. One of the biggest increases we had last month was the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's a 30-day long festival that includes a lot of street performances. So we're not expecting to increase next month for the first month since, I don't know, March 2020 or something. Paul, what were your other questions? I can't, or comments?
I was interested in the settings for tips set at £5, and then when I went to choose the currency, I was expecting to see $8.50, but it came up as $5. And the cheapskate, you thought, oh, $5 for £5.
We set our defaults at 5 for all of the strong currencies, and then higher for Malaysian ringgits and Japanese yen, and I think Polish zloty, although and maybe one of the krona. I can't remember, Swedish or Norwegian or Danish krona. I can't remember exactly what the defaults were set at. But yes, that is one of the things that we're going to be testing. Also, street performers are very welcome to change their defaults. They just go to their settings. They can change their currency when they travel, and they can change their default, the default value that people see when they first load a page. And a lot of street performers have left it as is, as behavioral economists will know is the case. But the ones who have changed it, you can really see a remarkable increase in the sort of most common tip that they get. So the street performers who've changed their default to 10 most often get $10. The street performers who've changed it to 15 or 20 most commonly get 15 or 20. Now, what we don't know is the conversion rates yet. That threshold for so we don't know if they're putting lots of people off by switching it up to 20 or not. And again, I think this is something we're going to be looking into.
There was a nice comment that Karol had, I think he's gone, about the musicians and statue, about do we know what type of performers are signing up post-COVID? Are they all genres, or are they mostly musicians, or?
Well, one thing that we've noticed for the first time is that people are finally using our platform to sell music. I think, Paul, this was another thing that you asked. People can upload their albums to our website, and the only difference in how our website works to, say, CD Baby, or, well, one of the ways that it differs from these music platforms is that the tip is very fast. So you get the album very quickly. You have to put your email address in as the tipper, but otherwise it's still just Apple and Google Pay, and it's designed for speed, basically. And then once you've bought the album, if you're on an Android phone or a phone that can download files, you get a a zip file that you can then download and it will unpack into your phone's library. And if you are on an iPhone, you get an email, which will email you the songs, because iPhones stop you from getting music into your phone unless you sync it with iTunes first on your laptop and then sync it with your phone afterwards, which is really annoying. But they also get a page immediately where they can stream the music. And then if they create a so-called fan account on bus.co, they can download their music from their account there and stream the music as well. So we're trying to give them a variety of different ways. And we've noticed that for the first time, street performers are actually using our platform to, you know, upload their music and sell it in the street. We have little signs that are just QR codes that say buy this album, and then it's got the value for the album said in the inside, you know, $10, $20, whatever. And they're finally using these. So yeah,
it's really encouraging to watch the artists generate further income, and that's, for me, that's the exciting part, that this is not ivory tower research. This is actually helping people develop sustainable careers. And that's at the front of our minds when we're doing this research, that if we can understand what makes people give, then it ultimately benefits the artist. And that's the main game here.
There's one thing that the research can't, I mean, I don't know if any research will ever be able to show this historically, is that street performers are less against cashless payments than they used to be. The old guard, you know, this sort of buskers who grew up performing in the 70s and 80s, doing crazy shows and not doing, you know, not having very specific hat lines at the end, and it was just, you know, far more theatrical and experimental than what you get on the streets nowadays. They hate the idea of somebody being able to scan a QR code from 10 meters away and then walk off without looking you in the eye and walking up to you. And now we're actually getting some street performers who were like that and are now using our platform to get cashless payments. So
interesting thing is the range too, Nick, that you don't actually have to walk over to the cap and tap on now. You can actually stand back in the crowd and tap on to, and that's fascinating, because it doesn't then show who's tipping. You know, they don't know necessarily who's actually doing the donation. You can be completely anonymous.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed the other day, I was testing out our signs in the corridor outside our apartment, and I was standing all the way over by the elevators, and the sign was up against the wall next to our apartment. It's probably about, I'm guessing, 10 to 15 meters away. And if I zoomed all the way in on my camera, I could actually scan the QR code from that far away. And I didn't realize that you could use the zoom function and still scan a QR code. So I really was standing quite far away from the QR. And then one thing I noticed is that I put the phone in my pocket. I didn't actually click the button, got back to work. And then later I could see in that sort of, whatever you call it, the notifications bar at the top, when I pulled that down, it said go to bus.co. And actually the QR code link had saved in my notifications, so that hours later I was still prompted to go and, you know, to go to this thing. And so you might be getting in tips, you know, when people have gotten back home or following days.
Okay.
That's just so useful, because that sort of cleared up one of the queries I had about the practicalities of not being online to make it. But that's extraordinary. I would never have thought that possible.
Are we going over time, Chelsea?
Well, this is such an amazing, well, first of all, it's the first time that we have two discussants. So this is, and it was quite rich, because obviously this come from two different perspectives. And also Nick's participation and contribution. Thank you very much, not only in the chat, but also give a little bit of feedback. And that is, it's been tremendously rich. I see we're also getting slower numbers. We're reducing in our audience. And so perhaps I just give a last, the chance to Tim and Meg to give a last response before we close up. And please, if there's other questions, Paul or anybody.
I think there is one other question. I'm wondering the difference between registering with Busco and uploading to streaming performances on other platforms, for example, YouTube, Twitch, when these platforms sometimes come with tipping and donation services. Nick?
Yeah, I was just typing a response to that, but sure. So you can't stream on bus.co. So you would be you'd be streaming on YouTube or Instagram or Twitch or wherever, doing your show there. And then when you ask for donations, sure, Twitch and YouTube and these other places tend to have inbuilt tipping links, but quite often the tippers are forced to make a profile on that platform, to register, enter an email address, password, that kind of thing before they can do the tip. Whereas with bus.co, the tip is first, and then after the tip is finished, you are asked if you would like to share your email address. So the tip is much faster, and some street perform. So the best anecdote we have about how this sort of works in practice is there was a festival who actually did a 24-hour online festival on Twitch with performers all over the world doing these short sort of 5 to 10 minute shows. And they kept on sharing, the first time this festival happened, they kept on sharing the bus.co profile link to get donations. And then the next time they did it, they just shared the Twitch link to get donations. And people were complaining that it was much easier to tip than the previous time. Now, I don't know if the conversion rate is higher with Twitch or if the average tip rate is higher than Twitch. So I can't tell you for certain that they made less money during the second festival because they'd switched the tipping thing. But one of the nice things about being a nonprofit instead of being a hedge fund backed Silicon Valley for-profit is that we don't actually care about increasing our user base so much. We have no pressures to get people's data before a tip can happen or getting signups from fans. So yeah, we can just have a really fast and simple tip. Yeah.
Thank you. This is yeah, and it's been great to have Nick here as well. That just adds a depth to the numbers beyond what we can present as academic researchers. So thrilled that you get a really rich understanding of the busking community through something like this. Unfortunately, we don't have a busk. I have busked when I was in my 20s. That's about as a clown. So I actually have clowned in my previous life. Just as a confession now.
Some of us sometimes still do in front of students. So
Yes.
So as we all prepare,
I can still juggle.
Yeah, as some of us prepare. So I have also a class later. I would like to thank you all for again for this special format. I think it's been quite inspiring. So we might actually consider this for a future time. Just so that you all know, in case, thank you, Paul. A big applause for the presenters, as well as the discussants, as well as Nick.
Thank you.
For sharing. We have recorded this, and I forgot to say that we have recorded this, and if you didn't want to be, you needed to turn your camera off. Apologies. But we will upload this in our YouTube channel for the CEOS. The Cultural Economics Online Seminar has a YouTube channel devoted for further visibility and accessibility to some of these ideas, which was quite rich. We also have the Twitter and other things going, the papers and all of that. But this has been quite a gratifying discussion. So thank you very much for the presenters, the discussants. We lost Karol already, and for Nick sharing the data and also sharing some insights during the conversation. So
sure.
Unfortunately, we don't hear the applause, but thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your interest in this research area as well.
Tim, did I hear your voice?
Yeah, look, thanks to everyone. We got so much useful information, and yeah, there's lots more to come, thanks to the Busking Project, without whom we wouldn't have the access to the data to do interesting things. And I think it benefits both the academic community, but also the street performer community to understand better what's going on.
And hopefully, if you're interested in this area, reach out to us, either Paul or I, about the special issue that we want to create in this area. I think that's
if possible. can you send me the information, not via the chat, but maybe via an email, and we can
Yes.
disseminate further via our social channels. I think that would be very helpful.
Fantastic.
Also linked to this seminar and to this presentation. I think that would be very helpful. And yes, we look forward very much to your follow-up work.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Trills.
Wonderful.
Thank
well,
you.
thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.